amazing is you can take knitting needles on a plane. And when you know all the rules and all the things you can't take on a plane, you can't take your nail clippers, although I think that may be okay now. It's amazing what you can't take on a plane. You can take knitting needles on a plane. And when I say knitting needles, I've got a prop here for you guys to see what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about knitting needles. Knitting needles. You can take something this large and carry it on a plane. So I was on a plane. And I breezed right on through with not just one pair of knitting needles, but my entire set of double-pointed needles, because I was in the midst of a project where I needed to switch sizes. So I had just this whole collection was like a roll of all these various knitting needles. That goes too far. The man behind me apparently innocently brought on a screwdriver set. Very precise, small, precision tools. They took his screwdriver set away from him, apparently. I only found out about this as I'm sitting there, happily knitting, in the waiting room. And this man is cursing up a blue streak. And he was saying, they took, I can't believe it, they were little, what could I have done with them? And the worst part about it all is, they let some lady on with a huge knitting needle. And I just put my knitting away. And I got out my book and said, oh, yeah, shocking. But you gotta wonder, what kind of mindset, what is it about knitting and knitting needles that would let you get away with something that is clearly, I'm sorry, but if I were in a bad mood, I would do some harm with this. So why am I allowed to bring those on? And I think it's because of the image of a knitter. The image of a knitter is a grandma. The image of a knitter is a pregnant woman who's knitting her baby booties. You know, the image of a knitter is this sweet, innocent, kind, maternal kind of figure. So how could they possibly be doing anything wrong? And honestly, I have researched it because I really want to know why. I'm like, I'm really grateful. I'm not complaining, but why? What's interesting, though, is I have this little gadget to cut my yarn because I knew I couldn't take scissors on a plane. But you can't take scissors on a plane, although you can take anything on a plane. So I bought this gadget, and it's a circle, and there is a razor blade in there, but it's embedded inside, and it just has these little notches. And I went ahead, and I was looking up why I could take a knitting needle on a plane, and I found out I can't take this on a plane. What, Ninja Stars or something? I don't know. But it's very interesting. It's very interesting, and I do think it has a lot to do with that. And it makes you think about that it's such a cliche that, in fact, there's like a reverse character out there, like Madame Defarge. Quietly knitting in the names of the people who will be next to have their heads cut off. Or Miss Marple, innocently knitting as she's figuring out who the murderer was. So there really is this interesting thing of what is going on with knitters and who are these people. And I think it is something that everybody knows. Knit, purl. They kind of think they know about knitting. It's one of those hobbies that you don't knit, but I'm sorry, Bill's not here, but I was going to say, but some of your cats knit, for example. You know, everybody kind of has a clue, but they really don't know what's going on in a knitter's mind. And so what I thought I'd do is kind of share with you some of the stuff that goes on in a knitter's mind. And one of the things that I did, I'm one of these feet first kind of people. So the second knitting project I did was knitting a suit. You can tell in this, like, oh God, she's nuts. And that's done on what's called a circular needle, which unfortunately I did not bring in my little grab bag tonight. But it's basically two of these needles stuck together on, there's like a wire in between them. So it's all done that, and you just keep doing it around and around and around. So I did a skirt. I cast it on, and it was the bottom of a skirt. that was going to fit Audrey's going up A-line, so it was pretty substantial. And that also had a hem in it, so I did a 2-inch hem, which means I went and did more. Well, I was very new to knitting and cheap, and so I was doing this on a teeny tiny, very short circular needle. And what I didn't realize is, there's something you see in a lot of knitting books when they say, make sure when you pick up on the second time you pick up on the circular, yes, make sure that your stitches aren't flipped. Because if your stitches are flipped, you knit a Mobius strip. I knit a giant hemmed Mobius strip that matched my jacket length. So I called up my friend who was a much more experienced knitter, and I was like, Sandy, I've knit a Mobius strip. She's like, what? And then finally she calmed me down enough to understand what I had done. She was like, oh, yes. And I could hear her husband in the background going, she's going to have to rip that all up. She's going to have to rip that all up. And I was like, oh, no, I can't rip it out. So she said, come on over. I'm going to teach you something. It's called steeking. And what it is you take the knitted object. In the case, some of us are braver than others, and we'll do it without doing this sewing on the side first. But what we did was we actually sewed on the sewing machine on each side, and then cut. And then she actually, on this particular one, she actually sewed the two together. I picked up those stitches, shipped them knitting. I still have that skirt. But that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And now I mentioned steeking, and steeking is a fascinating thing that knitters do. Now this is called Fair Isle, this type of knitting, and is done completely in the round. You see this guy is not in the round, he's a cardigan. The way I did that is after spending 2 years of my life with this lovely sweater, going everywhere with me, watching it grow like a little one, I took a pair of scissors and cut straight up the front. And it is probably one of the scariest moments in your life. Because you're like, really? This is going to happen. This is really going to work. I'm not going to lose it. And so there's a real leap of faith that's going on. So that's part of what I wanted to talk about, is for you guys to understand that when you see somebody happily, or at least quietly, knitting, there's a heck of a lot going on in that head. It isn't just knit 1, purl 2. It's keeping track of, again, I'll use this guy, it's keeping track of the pattern, but it's also keeping track of the decreases and increases. So in this case, you see how the peplum on the bottom is larger. Even as you're knitting, you're seeing the work going forward. You're seeing what that object looks like when it's finished. Or at least you think you are. I love this sweater. Absolutely love this sweater. It has been sitting in my sewing pile for years. And this is why. This is, I think, the 4th knitting project I did. I told you I take on big things. There's a very simple rule in knitting. It's called gauge. And gauge, it tells you by how many stitches you're doing, just how big the object is. So if you've ever had somebody knit something and it was way too big or way too small, they screwed up the gauge. Audrey took this thing. I came up with this. I was very proud of myself. I took a 1940s knitting pattern. I converted it from flat to circular so I could do the Scandinavian, the knitting style, the Fair Isle style. I picked out all my colors. I picked out each individual pattern. I figured out exactly how much of what I needed. I didn't check the gauge. This darn thing doesn't fit me. I tried to take apart the sleeves a little bit. Thank you, gussets. I tried to put in gussets. No, gussets is not enough. This is going to my teeny tiny knees. So that's another thing that goes on, is there's a lot of passion, a lot of risk-taking, and a lot of joy and suffering that is going on quietly behind the scenes of a knitter. So the next time you see someone knitting, perhaps on a plane, perhaps just in the doctor's office, now you'll know what's really going on in their heads. Thank you.